TV.
Hello everyone and welcome to Everyday Politics with Laura May Lindo. I am your host, Laura May, and I would like to start us off well, recognizing that I am having this conversation, this upcoming conversation on land that is held down, cared for, loved and stewarded by the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe and the Neutral people. And my reflection today, as I prepare to have a conversation with the former MP of Kitchener Centre, Mike Morrice, is around what it actually means to walk a path of reconciliation. There's been a lot of talk about the federal budget that recently came out, and a lot of equity-focused work that would in fact support our walk on this journey of reconciliation with Indigenous folks seems to be underfunded or not funded at all. And so one of the questions and reflections that I've been having, and what I want to have a conversation with Mike about, is how you actually walk that path without putting resources behind each of the steps that you take. If we aren't seeing our federal government do that kind of resourcing and investment in the kinds of issues that will support Indigenous communities across Turtle Island, in fact, then where are the spaces where we as individuals can plug in, learn more, and ask for better? And so coming up right after this break, I will be joined by Mike Morrice, and we will let the games begin.
Hi, Pastor Mark here. Join us each and every week on Sundays. All are welcome, no exceptions. That is St. Peter's Church, every Sunday at 11 a.m. God bless. We'll see you soon.
David Prang from the Chamber of Commerce, Brantford Brant, speaks with community members about events and organizations that impact the city of Brantford and the county of Brant. Chamber TV, Thursdays at 6:30 p.m., right here on Rogers TV.
Hello, just want to remind you that Lions See the Bingo is on Mondays here on Rogers TV, starting at 8, running till 9.
And we're off like a herd of turtles.
Holy sugar roll 29. Same great show, lots of prizes given away, and lots of funny little trivia along the way. Please join us, 8 o'clock every Monday, right here on Rogers TV.
Everybody knows not to drink and drive, but some people still think it's okay to take drugs and drive. Police have the authority, the ability, and the tools to determine if drivers are impaired by legal or illegal drugs. And because drug-impaired drivers can pose just as great a risk as drunk drivers, they face the same penalties, like the loss of their driver's license, a criminal record, fines, and more. A message from the RCMP, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and Arrive Alive, Drive Sober.
Hey everyone, it's Sean Ferfaro, your host for This Week in Rangers Nation. We are back for Season 2, and we're going to bring you everything you want with your Kitchener Rangers. We'll have exclusive highlights, game analysis, we're going to have special guests, alumni interviews, and so much more. And because it's me, we're always going to have a little bit of fun. Make sure you tune in for This Week in Rangers Nation every Friday at 6:30 on Rogers TV.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. And Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Listen, and we have so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
So for those that are watching, you know that I have experience in provincial politics. Federal politics is like a whole other thing for me, so I don't know. And before this even started, I asked Mike a question just to be able to make this first sentence. My first sentence and first question to you is about something happening in a standing committee on, what is it called? Standing Committee on Science and Research. Mm-hmm. And so you explained to me that the federal committee takes on large scope studies, so they can actually decide that they're going to look at a particular issue. And in this particular case, and why I wanted to have you on to try and help to unpack some of this, the Standing Committee on Science and Research decided to take on a study to look at the impact of the criteria for awarding federal funding on research excellence in Canada. That happened, right? Like for realsies?
I'm told it did.
So talk to me about that. Like before I even go into what I'm reading and what questions I have, what is happening?
So there's lots to unpack in the name of the study itself.
Yeah.
But in terms of committees, it would be similar, to, I expect, to the provincial government. One of the big differences is there are just more MPs federally than MPPs.
Yeah.
So there's 343 MPs.
Yeah.
And most folks, when they think about Parliament Hill, they think about the chamber,
Yeah.
where you might see question period, for example. In addition, though, to the work that happens in the chamber, a lot of really meaningful work happens at the committee level.
Yeah.
Committees are smaller groups of 12 MPs who do a variety of things. To me, most importantly, they study every piece of legislation, or most pieces of legislation if they've not been fast-tracked. And at committee, MPs can suggest amendments or improvements to different bills. To me, it's one of the most constructive things that individual MPs can do, something I spent quite a bit of time on myself, is showing up at committees and improving federal legislation.
Can you, so I have two questions for you and answer in whichever way, whichever one first. What is the makeup of the committee? Like, how, is it the same percentage of government to like the ratio?
It's meant to be a similar ratio to the overall breakdown of Parliament in that particular session. So the current committees, for example, are, I believe it's 6 Liberals, probably 5 or so Conservatives, and 1 Bloc MP. So it's meant to, resemble what the 343 ratio is in the chamber at committee. Now, any MP can actually propose amendments at any committee. And so as a Green MP, while I didn't have a spot on any one committee, what I kind of loved is I could show up to any committee
and still do the work.
That's right, and propose amendments. So on the Canada Disability Benefit that we might talk a bit about later, we were successful in securing more amendments than every other MP in the country combined, in part because we listened to the disability community and put the work in. But so that's one element is legislation. Another are studies, what you're referring to here. So when a committee's not in the midst of studying a particular bill, an MP can suggest a study that the committee could undertake. Ideally in the interest of deepening their understanding and helping to make better decisions on upcoming legislation. Unfortunately, it's not always the case. Committees are also a place of consistent partisan theater. So much like in the chamber, everything is recorded in English and French. And so some MPs will use committee time to get their clip for social media or to bring forward some interest they have for getting particular clicks.
And is the process that like there's the first reading and then it has to go to committee and then it comes back? Is that the same kind of process federally?
That's right. So when a bill is passed by MPs in the chamber at second reading, it would typically then go to committee where it's studied further, and that's where then committees can improve it and suggest amendments. Once amended, it goes back to the chamber for what's called third reading and then passage until it goes to the Senate. It is possible, and it has happened, that a bill will be fast-tracked and by unanimous consent, MPs in the chamber can decide they're going to skip the committee process for one reason or another. So not that every bill would go to committee, but the vast majority would
go through.
And it's interesting, right? Because you get into a smaller group of only 12 MPs where changes to law or future law can happen should you be able to secure the support of the MPs in that room that are often following instructions from their parties, but all the same, it's a real meaningful chance. People think about the larger chamber as where the work gets done.
But so much is getting done on there in the committee.
It can be the case.
Sorry, but so then when they're not doing something like looking at a piece of legislation, something like this can happen. So would this be like a particular member would have asked for this study?
So typically at the beginning of the session, members would each say, these are my priorities, the things I want us to study the most. And the chair of the committee would then help to prioritize the various studies, often based on how many seats that party has. So the Conservatives might be first to get a chance to have a study looked at, and then they'd kind of go through the list based on that.
So coming back to this, I'm so flabbergasted by the title. So I'm going to bring us back to this idea. So somebody somewhere, I will ask you to direct me so I can direct those that are watching to find out who it was that tabled this or asked for this study. But somebody decided that we needed to look at the impact of criteria for awarding federal funding on research excellence in Canada. And now the last meeting that was held was October 1st of this year. And I just want to read this motion that passed. On Wednesday, June 18th, 2025, the Standing Committee on Science and Research adopted the following motion: that pursuant to Standing Order 108-2 in brackets, the committee undertake a study on the impact of the various criteria for awarding federal funding, what they have on research excellence in Canada, that the committee evaluate whether the criteria used are still appropriate within evaluation committees, allow for the achievement of program objectives, strengthen the development of knowledge, and contribute to innovation, research, and science in Canada, that the committee assess whether modifications should be made to these criteria, and that the evidence and documentation received by the committee during the first session of the 44th Parliament on the subject be taken into consideration by the committee in the current session. Furthermore, that the committee devote at least 4 meetings to this study and report its findings to the House. So when I read that, and for those that are watching, I'll be sure to include a link so that you can read it yourself, right? I forgot my reading glasses, so maybe I made a mistake, right?
No.
But when I read that, I immediately thought, this is what's happening in the United States. How did you feel, and what were your thoughts when you were reading that motion?
Well, this is where nothing is always what it seems in politics. And so what is behind this study is some political parties and some MPs who are trying to dismantle efforts to instill better diversity, more equity, and more inclusion into institutions across the country. This is part of the backlash to efforts to better represent Canadian society in positions of power and influence. Often in politics, we see what I would call kind of lying by omission.
Yeah.
So what is not said anywhere in that motion, and we can get into the depth of the motion, but what is not mentioned anywhere is that we have systemic racism in Canada. And what that has resulted in is barriers for some groups of people to access Parliament, academic positions, etc. And as a result of identifying that there is systemic racism and that some groups are facing those barriers, institutions put in place efforts to be more diverse, to be more equitable, and to be more inclusive. And we have examples of that right across the country in universities and colleges where Black faculty are underrepresented, where Indigenous faculty are underrepresented, where people with disabilities are underrepresented.
Absolutely.
Now, none of that is mentioned in the text of that motion, because saying you don't agree with those things might not be very popular, or might create some divisiveness if you say, I don't think there is racism, although some political parties
have said so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, they're not going to put that into that motion, though.
Yeah.
Rather than talking about any of that, they will attempt to attack efforts to see more diversity, more equity, and more inclusion by using the angle of, we need to assess based on merit.
Well, and I'm going to pause you there and go backwards, because one of the things that they're talking about is criteria to access federal funding to do research in this academic space. But they don't tell you what the criteria is. Right. So can you speak a little bit about that? Like, what kinds of, in the efforts to diversify the academic or the post-secondary landscape, or this landscape, what are the criteria changes then that have happened that they would be actually talking about? Because it feels like they're talking about them. but not talking about them.
Yeah, I expect what they're upset with, and I don't have the details with me right now, but I expect, and what I heard from other colleagues of mine when I was in Parliament for almost 4 years, is concerns that somebody actually might be advantaged in the process if that person does identify as Black or does identify as queer. And in these efforts to dismantle those of us who've worked towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're taking this angle to get more people worked up and try to tear down, much like we're seeing in the United States right now as well, by not talking about why that is in there in the first place. The reality of the underrepresentation of certain groups that led to an identification that there are barriers, and so we will offer ways to try to level the playing field.
Yeah. And this to me is always like we're having a conversation of merit without having a conversation about human rights. And so when you think about special programs that the Ontario Human Rights Commission, for instance, proposes that people do to address some of these gaps, you can't say that that's an issue of, well, it's the criteria is faulty. The criteria isn't flawed if the criteria was actually initiated to be a special program of some kind to address this gap, right?
Absolutely. So this is, again, all the things that are not said in order to launch a political campaign and get a clip on social media, to get an article in the paper, to attempt to shift the narrative on a topic of that particular MP or political party's choice.
So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a little break, but when we come back, what I'm going to ask you about is another article that I read shortly after this. I actually signed on to a letter myself talking about the impact of some of the consequent asks that are happening right now. But what I want us to do when we do come back is talk about different ways. Like that was one example of how people could sort of get involved in this process. I'd like us to talk about that, the pros and cons and other kinds of things. And in the meantime, you can have some fresh made bread. All I'm trying to do is get people to eat the bread. So we'll be right back after this break.
Aging Well brings you conversations with experts to help empower your golden years with enthusiasm and optimism. Don't miss Aging Well with Angela and Alice Liu, Mondays at 7 p.m.
My name is Aaron from Monster Heat on YouTube, and if you love extreme challenges like I do, you'll get to witness some of this. See, over here at Monster Heat, we do it all, and you can watch it all on Rogers TV.
Hey, it's Chris and Cam, hosts of What's Buzzin' here. Man, we are so excited. We're back for another season.
Season 3, baby. We are back for more. We have so many amazing guests that have joined us so far and so many amazing guests coming up. Fun vibes all around.
Some bickering back or forth because we love to do that a little bit. So why don't you come join us Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. right here on Rogers TV.
I'm Wendell Clark with a word about winning. We all know it takes a team effort in any sport and with any challenge. You can be a part of the winning team that shuts out impaired driving. Whether you're out on the town or just hanging out with friends, drink responsibly. Always have a plan for a safe ride home for yourself, your family, and your friends. You'll be helping to shut out impaired driving.
Visit ArriveAlive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive. Drive sober.
Hello, just want to remind you that Lions See the Bingo is on Mondays here on Rogers TV, starting at 8, running till 9.
And we're off like a herd of turtles.
Holy sugar gold 29. Same great show, lots of prizes given away, and lots of funny little trivia along the way. Please join us, 8 o'clock every Monday, right here on Rogers TV.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, so before the break, I mentioned there was an open letter where I think it's like over I want to say 5,000, but I could be making that up.
Yep.
People have signed on, academics have signed on to this open letter talking about the impact of some of the consequent requests. Like somebody has asked for all of the personal information of those that have applied for federal funding using equity considerations or equity criteria. They want that made public, whether they got the funding or they didn't get the funding. But then after I was chatting with you about that and having us talk about that, I also saw on LinkedIn that OCASI, the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, had posted something following the release of the federal budget for 2025. And they said, and I'm quoting from their post, the 2025 federal budget seems to signal a quiet retreat from Canada's commitment to equity and racial justice. Key programs are being sunset, left without funding beyond the fiscal year, not because they're no longer needed, but through a slow, silent dismantling that avoids public scrutiny or formal announcements. And they pointed to programs like Canada's anti-racism strategy, the National Strategy Respecting Environmental Racism and Environmental Justice Act, the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Secretariat. These were like examples of what they said. And so I feel like, and I sort of hinted at this before, but I'm going to we're doing exactly the same thing that we're seeing in the States. And so I'm curious if you can speak a little bit. You can speak about some of those, but I want to know what kinds of examples you're also seeing, because you're more attuned to what's happening on that federal side.
Well, even just the study we were just talking about. So the motion that was passed is going to lead to individuals' names being shared. So if you're a Black researcher, for example, your name may then surface in this document that was requested as a part of this study. And that's very intentional. It's to strike a chill in institutions and individuals who have put in place and or benefited from efforts to ensure that our positions of power reflect a greater diversity, better equity, and more inclusion. And that's when people can then get doxxed on social media. There is real implications of partisan theater in Ottawa on individuals' lives. That is scary, and that's, I think, why these researchers are calling it out when it comes to ensuring that we push back against some of the efforts that are underway. In terms of the budget and some of these groups that are underfunded, one of those is actually a bill that I was a part of moving forward. It's the bill on addressing environmental racism. Environmental racism, of course, being the reality that when you look at all the wastewater plants and some of the infrastructure that is most harmful to human health, more often than not, it is in communities that are predominantly Black, racialized, and Indigenous. There's a great Netflix documentary about this called There's Something in the Water.
There's something in the water.
And it's the work of Dr. Ingrid Waldron that brought that Netflix documentary to life. It was part of what inspired my colleague Elizabeth May to bring forward the act that then required the government to create a strategy to address environmental racism. Lo and behold, in this budget, there's no funding for it. And if we don't talk about that, there's no pressure to address it. There was pressure this summer when programs addressing and supporting more inclusion when it comes to gender equality and gender-based violence, that was going to be underfunded. Groups pushed back, and as a result, that was changed when the final budget was released. So my sense is the interest of groups like these are to put that pressure on the government to say, actually, we're watching. This is why I think what you're doing in this show is so important, because I think the more that people understand what is happening in their federal governments and other levels of government, the more likely we are to keep them accountable and to have governments making decisions that reflect the broad interest of Canadians and not the fringe interests of the donors of any political party.
So tell me, on that note, because we are watching, and a lot of people don't even know what to watch for. So give me other examples. I'm gonna, for those that are watching, I'll be sure to have a link to There's Something in the Water and the work that Ingrid Waldron is doing, because it's phenomenal. If I'm going to ask you to also send me a link to the bill so that I can get that up for folks. What other examples are you seeing? What other things should we be watching for?
Well, where it gets worse is where we're seeing things that seem to be exported from the United States. And I'll use an example of a particular conservative MP who's best friends with the Vice President of the United States.
Yeah.
And what he's now doing in his critique of efforts to move towards more diversity, more equity, and more inclusion is he's actually calling it so-called liberal racism. He's trying to then rile people up that it is in fact racist to put criteria in that is looking to address the systemic racism that this MP will never actually mention in any of his petitions or conferences he's hosting, whatever the case. But the language that he's using will rile people up. It's designed to, will generate donations to the Conservative Party, but worst of all, it's so deeply disingenuous.
Yeah.
And it will mislead people about the realities of the inequity that has always been the case, and the efforts that are being attempted to try to level the playing field. So this is where, unless we talk about, unless we try to unpack this is what I'd call the partisan theater that erodes confidence in the work being done in Ottawa, which is important, can be very genuine, and can improve people's lives. As another example, the work that my team and I did on the Canada Disability Benefit, we fought, it's not nearly enough to get more funding for people living in poverty with disabilities. There's a reason why it's an extra $200 a month or up to. There's a reason why it's not distributed to every Canadian across the country. Because there are some people who are in greater depths of poverty than others. And if you're making $200,000 a year, you don't need the government giving you $200 a month. But if you're on ODSP, the Ontario Disability Support Program, and you're below the poverty line and can't afford to pay for housing in Kitchener,
you need that $200.
That's right. And the federal government promised that they would lift folks like that above the poverty line. They still haven't followed through on that promise. But we're going to direct the resources to those in the greatest places of inequity. Well, that applies in other areas, like when it comes to ensuring that our academic institutions in positions of chairs and all the rest, that better reflects the diversity of Canadians, and that a black researcher isn't penalized as a result of being black. That is the real work that is being undertaken, and that's what's being attempted to be dismantled by some that aren't going to, say all of those things. And folks can see all this stuff. I love that you're talking about the specifics. Everything that happens in Parliament, at committee, in the House of Commons, can be viewed any time of day. First of all, you can go to Ottawa and watch for yourself live, but you can go to it's called Parlview. parlvu.gc.ca.
Okay.
You can look up the committee of interest to you. You can look up the day of the meeting, and you can watch back for yourself. If you might not have time to watch it all back, you can also go to sites like Open Parliament and look up keywords. So if you're curious about who's talking about environmental racism or who's talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you can type those words in and see, even based on your MP. You can look up your particular MP. And if you're interested in housing, what has my MP said about housing at committee, in the chamber, in bills they've proposed? Openparliament.ca is one resource to help all of us have better access and more transparency to what's happening in our House of Commons.
When the committee is doing something like looking at, I understand when there's a piece of legislation that there would be moments where you could go in and you can give your ideas and your, no?
Not always, actually. Unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with the provincial government, but federally, a person cannot ask to present at a committee the way you can delegate at City Hall.
And you can do that if they don't bypass that portion of committee in the provincial legislature, then there's that moment. So federally, no.
The closest you can get federally is submitting a written brief. So sometimes on this study, a committee will say, we are going to accept briefs from Canadians. And again, on the work we did on the disability benefit, I then worked with local organizations who serve people with disabilities to encourage them to submit briefs. But in order to be a witness at a committee, a person needs to be invited by an MP.
Well, doesn't that explain? I need a moment because that explains a lot about what I am seeing.
So what happens in these committees is then the MPs will invite the witnesses that fit their ideological perspective to then influence what Canadians see. If you then watch that committee, you'll see, you know, talking points from that witness that reflect exactly what that particular party or MP wanted to get shared, rather than genuine curiosity from a mix of perspectives to better understand it. Now, ideally, the counterbalance is there's a variety of parties in that committee, and these different parties invite different people with different perspectives. Unfortunately, in our current parliament, and in part because of winner-take-all, very divisive first past the post, it tends towards leading towards fewer parties represented. That's what we saw in this last election, is the vast majority, I think there's 7 NDP and 20 some odd Bloc and 1 Green. The rest are all Conservative and Liberals. And so the witnesses at committee will reflect the breakdown, unless those MPs, and sometimes they might do this, might invite someone not to just serve their interest, but as a true expert to reflect their curiosity and have the issue explored better. That'll be up to that individual MP and or their party for how sincere they might be about exploring the topic or getting a clip for their donor.
So if they end up bringing a bunch of people, so some of the reports that I've read about the witnesses that have come in for this particular study, once they've made their decision, what happens? Is it like legislation that changes things, or criteria just changes? Another
really great question and a good counterbalance. Committees don't make decisions on their own. At the end of the day, what they're looking to do with this study, in this case it's an opposition motion, they're looking to get media attention on it, they're looking to create that chill I mentioned earlier in the sector. But all the committee can do is submit a report to Parliament that just sits on a shelf. If they're successful, they'd be interested in shifting the public discourse and putting pressure on the government to then change funding in the budget or to make a legislative change. But at the end of the day, it's Parliament that finalizes legislation, and most pieces of legislation are proposed by the governing party. There are private members' bills that can also get approved, but a committee on its own does not change funding, does not change or does not propose legislation, and a study doesn't change public policy on its own.
Okay, so we're going to take another break, and that makes me happy. It makes my heart sing, because what I feel has just happened is that you've pointed out a number of unique ways that people can get involved, and I want us to talk about that. From every bit of chaos, I always think there's an opportunity for us to build something new, and so we're going to have more snacks, and we'll be right back after this break.
What's Up Stratford is a monthly look at what's happening in and around Stratford. Host Peter Moranger talks to a variety of guests, from politicians to artists. What's Up Stratford, Sundays at 3:30 p.m.
You're watching an interesting local show on Rogers TV and you want to know more. That's when you head to rogerstv.com. Our website provides more information about our programs, our hosts, our schedule, and about how you too can get involved with Rogers TV. Visit us online at rogerstv.com.
Hi, I'm Dave Carroll. Every Thursday at 8 p.m. right here on Rogers TV, we have a brand new show called About Brant with Dave Carroll. We're going to be talking about Brant and the different areas of the community that makes Brant County's Six Nations tick. We're going to be talking with people from all sorts of different areas and helping us understand the community we have better. Every Thursday, 8 p.m., About Brant with Dave Carroll right here on Rogers TV.
Just like any other job, to succeed in the NHL, you gotta take care of business.
You need to know how to motivate fellow employees.
Come on, boys!
It's important to be goal-oriented.
Assist team members whenever possible. Always put the customer first.
Listen to this builder. This place can't believe what they just saw.
Hey, beats a desk job.
What's wrong with a desk job?
The regulars, the guys who keep this place in business. Last week, they had something to celebrate. Jason had just finished university. So they toasted his profs, his TAs, his old roommates. Well, they toasted just about everyone. But I worry about and take care of my guys. So even when I know they're not driving, sometimes that means bringing them a little surprise. And then they had a drink to me.
Brought to you by Smart Serve Ontario and Arrive Alive, Drive Sober.
Welcome back, friends. Welcome back. Okay. I want us to sort of shift gears because I feel deeply concerned about partisan politics. Yeah. The thing that I'm finding fascinating as I'm watching, especially like through the lens of equity and equity changes and a shift in values for Canada, I'm finding it very interesting that typically people would say, in Ontario, for instance, the Conservatives under Doug Ford are very closely aligned with the ideology of Donald Trump in the US. Right. But that's letting a lot of sort of everyday people think Conservatives and Republicans are very much aligned and ideologically the same. But we're seeing these kinds of equity shifts happening on the federal stage under a Liberal government. And so I have my own thoughts about what's happening. I have my own feels about what's going on. And I was very curious because you've been inside the belly of that beast. What is happening? Like, what is going on?
Well, first of all, you're right. Last week, a Liberal MP joked that this budget was a good progressive conservative budget. He was partly joking, and there was more nuance, and I really appreciate this. Is Nate Ernstkind-Smith. He offered a very nuanced take that takes some courage. So it's very easy to pull out little pieces, but there's some truth to that joke. Yeah. I think behind your question, though, is the sense that I get from folks in our community, which is that we want that we don't have to accept this hyper-partisan approach to politics, and that our elected representatives should be there fighting for their communities first and foremost, rather than taking orders from their political party. And that kind of hyper-partisanship doesn't serve us. No. And actually, the more we look into this, the more we see it's actually fairly recent in the last few decades that we've allowed for this to happen. So what does it look like in practice? You can look at what percentage of the time does an MP vote along party lines? Meaning, I think there's 169 or 170 Liberals, 119 odd Conservatives. What percentage of the time do they all vote the exact same way on a piece of legislation? And a group called the Samara Institute for Democracy looks at this for us and reports it back for us. And the numbers...
Samara Institute?
Yeah, the Samara Institute for Democracy. They even do exit interviews with MPs, so you can see anonymously what MPs might have to say about their time in Parliament and all the rest. When they look at this, the percentage is striking. It's like 99.5% of the time. MPs vote with their parties. There is a position, a paid position in the large parties called the whip. And that person's job is to help ensure that the MPs all vote the same way. And then when somebody might not vote the same way, well, then we allow for conversations about how that person is going rogue, not a team player. When in fact, right. What is also true is that person may have said, actually, this is not in the best interest of my community. And in my view, it is quite brave of that MP for saying to their party, you know what, I agree, amongst Greens we have common values, but my boss when I was in Parliament is not Elizabeth May. My boss is my neighbors who I am elected to serve. That is where, in my view, democracy should be more important than partisan politics. It's not always the case, and we've allowed for the Prime Minister's office and the party whip and other of these kind of party apparatus to take power over, the votes, even the words that an MP says. I saw far too many of my colleagues being handed a script and reading word for word what they've been handed. That's not to say there isn't, again, nuance here. An MP might have a chance at caucus to voice their displeasure. Sometimes they have the chance to 24 hours before the vote, let their party whip know they're going to vote differently. But there's reasons why it doesn't happen often. The MPs who vote differently are more often than not the MPs who end up in cabinet. They're not the MPs who end up chairing committees. So there's various incentives that are there that are used by the parties to reinforce so-called party discipline that to me takes away what should be the case, which is when I was an MP, my job was to listen to the community, go make progress for the community. It's easier to make progress when my colleagues knew I wasn't there just to score a point for the Green Party, but because I had neighbors of mine living in poverty with disabilities that I was looking to improve their lives or to get more affordable housing built, not because I was trying to plant my flag in the issue, but because there's a real issue in our community of both folks who are facing the housing crisis unsheltered and young people and others and seniors on fixed income. All of that to me made it easier to get the work done when my colleagues knew I wasn't there just to play a partisan game. We, though, can influence it. And I think you wanted to talk about examples of where that's been the case, right?
I love concrete examples.
So here's one example from my time in Parliament. If I look at the vote where the most number of MPs broke party discipline and voted for a motion that their parties didn't vote for, which one was it? It was a motion that I had put forward originally and worked with the NDP on, calling for a citizens' assembly on electoral reform. Meaning we wanted to get together regular people, like a jury, to get expert advice to make recommendations on improving our democracy. It wasn't to create a new system, even just to make recommendations. This had actually been approved by the Liberal Party at their last convention as part of their party policy. And the motion was actually led by a third-party group called Fair Vote Canada. This is where I think civil society organizations are so important to depoliticize things, to bring their expertise, but most importantly of all, to mobilize people.
Exactly. I'm going to add, for those watching, I take notes, so I'm going to add Fair Vote Canada as well.
So Fair Vote did an amazing job with this motion where they engaged with chapters across the country. So people in communities like ours who are members of Fair Vote Canada, they then got emails from this national organization, from their local chapter affiliates to say, heads up, this motion will be voted on. And this is an opportunity for us to start up a conversation about improving our democracy. Fair Vote then encouraged their volunteers to go meet with your MP and raise it with them. Because the reality is, that's the third part of our democracy. MPs are meant to listen. They're meant to then go and fight for the people they're serving. And the third piece is they're meant to be accountable to their communities.
That's right.
And that accountability comes from when people watch shows like this one, get informed and engaged on issues, hear from organizations like Fair Vote, and then reach out to their MPs to advocate for a change. In this case, it was a national campaign on a very specific motion that every MP was going to have to vote on. So I think Fair Vote did an incredible job kind of setting it up for the best chance of success. And as a result, folks in our community reached out to their MPs. They sent them emails. They asked for meetings. And that happened right across the country. As a result, when that finally came for a vote, 3 parties voted together in support of the motion. That was the Bloc, the NDP, and the Greens. The Liberals and Conservatives voted against the motion as a party. But when you look at individual MPs, 39 Liberals and 2 Conservatives, maybe even 3, broke party rank and voted in support of the motion. And when I spoke with those MPs leading up to the vote and afterwards, and I asked them why they were that courageous, they told me, more often than not, it's because they met with constituents of theirs. Who impressed upon them how important it was to them. And as a result of that pressure, of that engagement, their votes shifted. In fact, in Waterloo Region, I'm really proud that 3 of the 5 MPs in Waterloo Region voted for that motion. 2 Liberal colleagues of mine, as well as myself, voted in support. If it was up to Waterloo Region, we would have passed that motion. But it was, in my view, because of those volunteers who took the time out of busy days and lives, away from work and kids and everything else, to engage in a particular moment, recognizing that that was a chance to improve our democracy for the better. And we could do that more often. And one thing that would really help is when we have organizations like Fair Vote Canada that are doing that kind of organizing, when people then show up and get activated in campaigns like that, and when we choose to celebrate the MPs who advocate for their communities, even when sometimes it might not be exactly the party line, and say, you know what, they probably hold the same values that party holds, but their community should be the ultimate accountability point ahead of some partisan line.
So funny, because as you're speaking, I keep thinking about that letter that you and I co-signed, which made, like, for you it was different because you were sitting in the federal side. For me, the ripple was real, right? Because I had won and ran for the NDP. You were a Green Party member, but our community had needs. And it was a split second that you and I had a conversation.
Well, and I think by and large, people in our community, when I knock on doors still, what I hear from so many people is that they want to see elected leaders working together. And not just in the theatrics, but in the practical. That letter we worked on together was a very practical need for the community that wasn't about the NDP or the Green Party. And I think to your credit and to others who do these kinds of things, sometimes I've seen political parties actually just want to plant their flag in the issue. They want to be seen as the only ones who care about that issue. In fact, in the last election, I was on CBC at one point, and one of the questions I got was, Mike, but other parties agree on that issue too. Why is that such a priority for you? I said, well, we shouldn't have to pretend that the Greens are the only ones who care about affordable housing. To me, my goal actually is to get more affordable housing built, and that means working with other parties to get that done. And when we do joint letters like the one you and I did, or I'm sure you were part of many provincially, where we build up coalitions across party lines, that to me reflects what I hear from people in our community, which is put the issue first and work with anybody, even those that I might not agree with when it comes to their efforts, for example, to erode diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not to say that I can't still work with that person when we agree about affordable housing, because that's going to benefit my community when it comes to getting more housing built. And I can park and focus my concern on diversity, equity, and inclusion in that debate we're going to have, and then work with that person on the issue where we do agree. And that, to me, is going to get more results for our communities, even when it's difficult. Right?
You know what? I also, sorry, I don't want to move from that point, because we started off talking about the shift in values, right? And so there's this possibility that when we say park the anger about equity supports and whatever that could cause those kinds of tensions, so that we can do this work over there. Some people think that means we're letting go of the equity work over there, but sometimes by working together with folks on an issue that they didn't think they could work with you on, you can actually start talking about the equity issues, because you can't have a conversation about affordable housing without having a conversation about equity.
That's right.
You literally can't.
They are, of course, all interconnected. And if we allow ourselves to find common ground on some issues, I think you're right. In fact, on electoral reform, there were a few Conservatives who I pretty much didn't agree with on anything else. But we could work together on electoral reform. Why not take that opportunity and be honest with them about where we disagree, and also work with them here, and maybe that actually opens up a conversation where we can take down the rhetoric, take down the divisiveness that is incentivized by the way we elect people in this country, but doesn't have to be the way. And that's not what I think people in our community sent me to Ottawa to do. They didn't send me there to further inflame issues. They sent me there to be a voice for folks in our community and to get things done at the end of the day.
So listen, we've come to my favorite part of the interviews. Ooh, I love it. If you could snap your fingers, right, and make one system change, what would it be? And for those that are watching that may be new, the reason I get people to do this is because we spend so much time putting energy on the problem that I feel like we make the problem grow.
Yeah.
So I want people to take a moment to speak into the universe what they want to see.
Yeah.
So it's your opportunity. You have all the power.
Well,
snap your fingers.
This is not going to be a surprise to you based on the conversation we just finished having. If there's one change, to me, the thing that gets behind so much that we're facing, it's moving to a way of voting where every single vote counts.
Yeah.
If we shifted to some form of what's called proportional representation, we would see places of elected people where it better represents the people that they are serving.
Yeah.
And that means on any issue we're talking about, it means less divisive rhetoric. It means more diversity. It means incentives to be collaborative rather than to plant your flag in the issue. And it also means that people will have more trust in their democracy. The number of people who said, Mike, I don't vote because my vote doesn't count.
Yeah.
Even worse in ridings, unlike ours in Waterloo Region, there are some in the country that have voted the same way the last 50 years. And someone can say, okay, if I don't believe in that party, I'll never see my vote represented, because the way we elect people in this country is this winner-take-all, divisive, regressive, first past the post. We're one of the last OECD countries, along with the US and the UK, to still use this, that creates mass distortions. You were talking about provincially earlier, for example.
Yeah.
In the last provincial election, only 45% of people voted.
Yeah.
Of that 45%, 40 some odd voted for the party who got the most seats. That means around 20% of Ontarians voted for that party. That party got 100% of the power.
Yeah.
The two other parties, their popular vote combined, the Liberal and NDP popular vote, was more than the Conservatives, yet they get a fraction of the power at Queen's Park.
And literally such a small fraction that there is no change to be made there.
That's right.
Using those tools.
With a so-called majority, the current governing Conservative Party, under what I would call a false majority, can bring forward any legislation unless the court stop them or people power does, which we have had examples where the labor movement or on the Green Belt, that people power stopped a majority government. But when it comes to legislation at Queen's Park, first past the post allows for this mass distortion where only 20% of people voted for a party, but they get 100% of the power. And that's not uncommon. You look at Quebec's most recent elections, you look at the federal most recent elections, and what it leads towards is then people feeling disenfranchised, disengaged, and then this whole thing about fear-based voting where I'm not going to actually vote for what I want, I'm going to vote to keep out the thing I don't want. Imagine if people could go to the ballot box and just say, I'm going to vote for what I'm looking for somebody I believe in, who's with a party I believe in, and then we see our parliaments then working on behalf of people. As a result, you wouldn't have parties chasing votes in individual ridings under some partisan game. You would have a far more collaborative democracy that on the issues we care about most, we would actually see progress on. And so I believe so deeply in trying to improve our democracy. And if I could, somebody did promise it, a certain prime minister.
That's it. Mike, it has been absolutely a pleasure. I'm going to invite you back on one day to just talk about reform, like parliamentary reform, voting reforms, that kind of stuff. It's going to happen.
I love that you're doing this show, Laura May, to put a spotlight on politics and our democracy in ways that people can plug in. I mean it when I say if people choose to engage in these things, our democracy will more closely reflect our interests. But it's not just at election time, right?
No,
it's
all
between
the time.
elections. Folks who are watching this show, choosing to write their MP, choosing to watch these issues, maybe even going to Ottawa and watching our parliament take place. For better or for worse, they're more accountable when we're keeping track and getting engaged in these issues. So I appreciate you for having me on.
Beautiful. We will be right back after this break.
The Cruise TV brings you the people and stories behind the coolest cars on the road. Don't miss the Cruise TV, Sundays at 7 p.m.
Hello, just want to remind you that Lions TV Bingo is on Mondays here on Rogers TV, starting at 8, running till 9. Same great show, lots of prizes given away, and lots of funny little trivia along the way.
Mondays at 6 p.m., we're bringing an exciting new show to you, Inside Brant with Armanda. You can look forward to it to find out what's going on in Brant County. And we will have all kinds of local artisans and tons of stuff that your family can enjoy. So if it's happening here in Brant County, you can be sure to see it here, 6 p.m. every Monday on Inside Brant.
For 25 years, you've been helping to make our roads safer by doing the right thing. You've been the designated driver, you've stayed over, called home, you've called a cab or a friend, and planned ahead. Let's keep doing the right thing. Support sober driving by getting yourself and your friends home safely.
Do the right thing.
Visit ArriveAlive.org to find out more. Arrive Alive. Drive sober.
My name is Chef D. Most days, you'll find me feeding high-profile personalities in even higher-pressure kitchens. But now I'm taking an ordinary food truck and a slice of summer to get out of my comfort zone and into parts of the community normally out of my reach. It's a gamble, but if I can use my passion for food to help out some amazing folks, it'll be worth the road trip.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Wasn't that an amazing conversation with Mike? I'm so pleased that he agreed to join me. For those that were watching, as I promised you, I will make sure that there are links to a number of the organizations that Mike raised, so Fair Vote. I'll definitely try and find a link to There's Something in the Water and the work that Dr. Ingrid Waldron has been doing. It is fantastic and phenomenal. She also has a book. I'll make sure to have a link for that. And where we started was with the standing committees. I will make sure to have a link to the variety of standing committees that are available in the federal side of our House, along with a specific link for the standing committee that is looking at this research criteria, because I think it's important for folks to dig a little bit deeper and get a sense of what's happening there. If you don't already, please make sure to follow me on Instagram. It is everydaypolitics_official. So make sure that you follow me there. And if there is anybody that you think of that might be a good guest to have on the show, or any issues that you want me to tackle, send me a note and I am your girl. I will make magic happen. Have a good one, and we will see you next week.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
After a night out with your friends, not having a plan for a safe ride home can leave you in a bad spot. You could end up riding in a police car, an ambulance, or a hearse. These unplanned modes of transportation can be a costly choice and do not take you home. Your plan could include a designated driver, a taxi, or public transit. Drink responsibly, choose your ride, and have a plan for a safe ride home.
Visit ArriveAlive.org to find out more.
Hi, I'm Mike Farwell, and I'd like to invite you into this studio every weekday from 9 until 1 for a show that I think you're going to like. It's called The Mike Farwell Show, and it deals with the issues of the day. Local, provincial, national, even international. You'll hear from the newsmakers, and you'll get the chance to make news yourself when you call in and share your opinion. If you want to know what's going on in your community, The Mike Farwell Show is the place to find out.
Celebrate the holiday season with Brantford's 49th Annual Freedom House Santa Claus Parade, presented by Grand Bridge. Rogers TV is bringing you live coverage of all the festival floats, marching bands, and even Old St. Nick himself. Saturday, November 29th at 2 p.m.